All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Green Local School District Board of Education meeting for October. I'll just say initially, this is a split meeting with some attending remotely, and Mr. Chinaki and myself that are in person. So you'll hear voices, and you'll see the Mrs. Stoynoff, Mrs. Finelli, and Mr. Cohen on the screen, and hear them as per the guidance from the Ohio Department of or Ohio Revised Code, I believe, from the governor's office. We'll just leave it at that. So, Mrs. Snowberger, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Chinaki?
Here.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Mrs. Finelli?
Here.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Here.
Would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, moving forward with the approval of the agenda, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented this evening?
So moved.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki. Mrs. Snowberger?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. There is no need for executive session at this time. And we also don't have any visitors or public participation on agenda items. So we'll move on to number 6, the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes of September 28th, 2020?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Finelli. Mrs. Snowberger?
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you for the financial report. The superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the financial statement and payment of bills from September 2020. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff. Mrs. Snowberger?
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item B, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the correction to Resolution 21-032 to change the fund from 019 to 510 on guidance from the State Auditor's Office. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Finelli. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Mrs. Snowberger, in layman's terms, is this just putting money where the auditors say you should put it?
Correct. They
Okay.
just, we're getting the money from Summit County, so I put it in a local fund, and then once I start thinking about it a little bit, because it's CARES money, it's technically federal, it's just going through a pass-through, so when I called them, they said they felt it was more appropriate to be in a 510 for federal funds.
Okay. Have you called the roll, please?
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item C, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the revision to the Certificate of Estimated Resources in the amount of $64,963,741.88 and the revision to the fiscal year 21 permanent appropriations to reflect the change in letter B above. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. And a
Second.
second. Thank you, Mr. Chinaki. Mrs. Snowberger?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And before we move on to the new business, just because it's such a rather large number, the 64 million, you mind just throwing a little bit of, just a basic info for that?
Yeah, it does seem like a really large number, especially compared to the budget, but that is because it includes the unencumbered money from last fiscal year as well, which is, I don't have it in front of me, but I think around $12 million and some change. So it's basically what you had left that you didn't have a purchase order for last year, plus any money that you are estimating you're gonna receive this year.
Okay,
And it did increase quite a bit with the CARES money as well, so.
okay. Yeah, because sometimes people are like, well, it's $64 million, so,
Right.
okay. So that would be what you would look at on the forecast if you would look at the whole estimate or all of the funds that we're going to get this year, along with whatever it is that we still had to carry over.
Right, but the forecast is only general fund, and
Oh,
this
right.
includes all funds in the
Oh, okay.
district, so.
Okay, all right.
That's the major difference. So the general fund is around $48-50 million,
Mhm.
and then the other 14 are all restricted funds that we have in the district for one place or another.
Okay, all right, thank you. I should have asked you that before we voted, but I just
Oh, no,
because it's such a big number, I just wanted to give people some information on that. All right, on the new business, the consent calendar note. Items under the consent calendar are considered routine and being acted under one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the board votes, unless a board member requests an item be clarified or even removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Finelli. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Did we approve the previous one? I'm sorry to.
Yeah, we already did. I just, I had asked the questions after we had
Okay.
voted. I
Gotcha.
was a little bit upside down on that one. Jeff, would you mind, I know we have some, how we're doing supplementals as
Yeah,
the
so-
season's kind of hit and we know we're going to start playing?
Yeah, so it's hard to believe that we have now ended the first 9 weeks of 2020. And as we end our fall season, some are still taking place, obviously, but we're looking forward to our winter season. So you can see on this evening's agenda, we want to make sure, in light of everything with COVID, that we're waiting to make sure everything will occur. And at this point, students, both in the classroom with extracurriculars and with athletics, are starting to work on these winter programs. So this evening, those are on there, and we're looking forward to a winter season. And then also, I would like to call everyone's attention to 4A, Paula Thompson just turned in her retirement, and she's been a great asset to Green Local Schools for a long time. So certainly, we wish her well, and I know I worked directly with her at the middle school for a number of years, and she was just a class act, touched a lot of lives, and we're definitely going to miss her, but we wish her well on her future endeavors. And then finally, if you've read our newsletters and the different communications out there, not only locally, but I guess for that matter around the state and country, substitutes is something that we're desperately looking for in all areas. But on the agenda this evening, we did make some changes to some of our rates as just one more way to try to get more people interested in substituting for Green Local Schools. So I know this sounds like an infomercial, but if you are interested or know anybody, we would certainly love to have you part of Green Local Schools in any capacity as a substitute.
And they can find that information on our website, is that correct?
Absolutely.
Or HR, I think? Okay.
Yes.
What's available? Okay. And also the link to signing up for the Wexley.
Yeah, Rachel Wixie and Associates. And then there's information if you go to our HR website where you can get directly with Mrs. Bruick, and she can point you in the right direction in terms of what interest you may have in terms of subbing.
All right. If you have the interest, we'll have a place for you, for sure. Any other questions? Mrs. Snowberger?
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki?
yes,
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item B, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the bus routes established for the 2020-2021 school year and authorize the superintendent or designee the authority to designate or relocate subsequent school bus stops and routes. Do I have a motion to approve that?
so moved,
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff. Any comments or questions on it? That's pretty routine.
Normally, this is something that takes place at the beginning of the school year on the August agenda, but for obvious reasons, now that we have every student has the opportunity to to be in school. The routes were just set and solidified, so that's why it appears on the agenda this evening.
Okay. Mrs. Snoberger?
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item C, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the solicitation of bids for roof work at Green High School and Greenwood Early Learning Center. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki, and I think I heard a second from Mrs. Finelli.
Yes.
Questions or comments?
Just as part of our, looking at our facilities plan, we were able to do some asphalt projects last year, and this year, our roofs are something that we need to look at very closely. So the two buildings that we are focusing on are the high school and Greenwood, and this will give us an opportunity to see what comes in terms of the rates, to see if these are appropriate projects to move forward on. Certainly, the high school has been around since the 90s, and the roof has served us well. We just want to continue to maintain and improve where it needs to be. And then certainly Greenwood Early Learning Center is another building that we need to make sure everything is where it needs to be. So this is something that may be a project at a later date, depending on what comes back from those numbers.
Okay. Mrs. Snoberger?
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item D, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the solicitation of bids for bus garage demolition of the south garage and resurfacing of the pavement. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff. Questions or comments? Mrs.
Are we
Snoberger?
going to rebuild this garage portion or,
No, so, yeah, that's a good question. So there's the bus garage where the offices are for our transportation supervisors and the meeting room. Across from there is a garage that used to house school buses. Because buses are now longer, they no longer fit in the garage. And because the garage has been around for so long, it's time for it to be considered to be taken down. And then if that were to happen, we would have outside parking for our buses that would take up the area that right now that building exists upon. So it would be outside parking, but that's why the potential resurfacing of the pavement's on there as well.
okay.
Okay, good question. Mrs. Snoberger?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item E, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve change order number 2 in the amount of $415.69 from Adkins Building Company Incorporated for vestibule upgrades at Green High School and Green Intermediate School. Monies to be provided through the Safety Security Levy Fund. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Finelli. And a
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki. Questions or comments? Seems pretty straightforward. Mrs. Snoberger?
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item F, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the agreement with Education Alternatives to provide special education and related services to students during the 2020-21 school year due to the nature and severity of the student's disability in the amount of $158 per day, effective August 21st, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff,
Second.
and thank you, Mr. Cohen. Questions or comments? Mrs. Snoberger?
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item G, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the school resource officer contract with Summit County Sheriff's Office beginning January 1st, 2021, and terminating December 31st, 2023. This contract is paid through the district's Safety and Security Funds, Fund 030. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki and Mrs. Spinelli. I'll assume that's a good second. Questions or comments?
Just that it's hard to believe that it's been a few years now since we had the safety and security levy, and when it was passed, we brought on the Summit County Sheriffs. This contract would take us through the time period of that levy. So obviously, the board will have to consider next steps when it comes to the end of this contract, but that was fulfilled through the community here in Green with the safety and security levy.
And we're fairly happy with what we have. I think I've heard nothing but pretty positive comments from the SRO, from families with the SROs being available and.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard a lot of positives from students, staff, and from our parents. Certainly, if you drop your children off or you're out and about, the traffic patterns and the jobs they do to keep us all safe outside the building is huge. And then it's great. I was able to hit all the buildings today and to see the SROs interacting with students and walking around. All those are positive. So yeah, it's a great partnership. And like I said, it's just hard to believe how fast time goes that we're already talking about the second contract with Summit County Sheriffs.
Oh, I know. Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Snowberger?
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mrs. Spinelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoyanov?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Item H, the superintendent and treasurer recommend the Board of Education approve the contract with PSI Associates Incorporated for district nursing services beginning August 1st, 2020 through July 31st, 2025. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
Second.
And thank you, Mrs. Stoyanov. Questions or comments?
Yeah, just real quickly, this is another really strong partnership. We have a district nurse in Therese DeLucia that comes to us through PSI, and then each of our buildings has nurses representative in them. And obviously, during this time, they've always been extremely important, but now the focus and what they do for us is just on a spotlight level. And I will say, working with PSI and Summit County Public Health and different health agencies has been great as we try to put into place best practices with COVID. Our dashboard that if you look at has a lot of information on there. We talked a little bit about it at last month's board meeting, but there's not a week that goes by that we're not having conversations with PSI and Summit County Public Health that we're looking at data, looking at how to improve upon things, and having professionals like them in our corner to partner with us has just been huge. So just like with the SROs, outstanding partnerships make everything better. PSI is definitely in that same vein. So just want to thank them for continuing to work with us.
And do they provide a little bit of training or guidance for our staff also?
Yeah, they
what to look
provided,
for,
yeah, every year they provide different training types. They offer different services that are on demand, and then obviously with COVID, they helped look at our forms, our paperwork, talked about quarantines, helped us best practices setting up quarantine rooms. And then if we have any kind of questions or things that come up, we give them a call and we have a meeting with a health team very quickly. And it's nice because they also are in other school districts, so they're able to share their expertise. If we have a question, another school district may have an answer that fits for us and vice versa. So it's definitely a good organization to be part of.
Nice. Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Snowberger?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoyanov?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mrs. Spinelli?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Prior to we get to the recognition of the, well, as we move on, we'll just put another piece to that. Jeff, you had mentioned, how you work with PSI and the Summit County Health Department, the dashboard and all those kind of things. would you, maybe now's the time, but maybe just give a little overview of how that, what all, I mean, we don't have that much time to give like your whole thing, but, maybe just a overview of some of the things that you kind of process either daily or weekly to just, make sure that the ship is running as right
Yeah.
as it can.
So one of the things, obviously, with COVID, it goes without said because it's a pandemic and nobody knows everything we need to know to plan appropriately. So with school, we obviously spent a long time trying to make sure that we could provide the best possible education in the safest way. And we've partnered with many different health entities, including we have a safety and security committee that's made up of parents that work in the medical field. So we use them, we use Summit County Public Health, we use Cleveland Clinic, Akron General, SUMA, just so many partners. I'm on calls every single week with the health department and other districts. So in looking at all of that, we want to make sure that we keep that commitment and do everything we can. And like we said at the previous board meetings, we know there's going to be COVID cases. It's in our area, it's in the community, so we're monitoring very, very closely. And when we do have those cases, it's super important for us that we identify, we take the steps that the health professionals are telling us to do as swiftly as possible. I do want to commend our students. Like I said, when I went into the buildings, you're always looking to make sure that things are being followed to the degree they can be, and our kids are doing an amazing job. Our parents, I know that this has not been easy whatsoever in terms of having to be flexible. It's stressful. I think we're all tired of COVID. I know the quarantines are extremely challenging when your kid's doing everything the right way and you get that phone call and that letter. But all of these things that we're doing are for the goal of sustaining our in-person learning with the option of the remote. So when we look at that dashboard, we wanted to analyze what are we seeing right now? Are we seeing spread within the schools from student to student, teachers to students? So in analyzing the data, up to this point, the good news is we are not seeing that. We are seeing, like other schools, when we talk to them, there are cases, but they are coming from outside of the school buildings in the community, and then when they come in, we're able to quickly address it and move forward. So do I wish there were absolutely no cases whatsoever? Yes, but knowing that there are, I feel like we're doing as good of a job as possible to continue it. I see a lot of happy kids. I know our staff wants to be able to continue with the options, and we're doing everything we can. But I think to the original question in terms of that dashboard, we really are talking about it and looking at it every single day, and we want to make sure that that is continuing to be the pattern, that it's not coming from the schools, it's coming into the schools, and then we have to address it quickly. And it's just become that's kind of the process now. When we come into a week, we're just doing everything we can to sustain our learning model.
And so when, and the dashboard has a link on the main website, right?
Yes.
And then, and then does it go to each individual building, or is it, I think originally it was all just kind of on the front page. Are we going to redesign that a little bit to make it a little more?
Yeah, we're trying to make it as user-friendly as possible. So some parents have reached out and said, look, we like all the data, but we want to know what's active right now in our school building. So if I have a kid at Green Intermediate, I want to know right now what the active cases are. And then we've had others that really want to look into the data and drill down. So we have been having conversations and trying to make it work for everybody. So we've talked about having an initial landing page that would have the active cases, and then when you click on it, you would be able to get into the number of quarantines. So right now, if you would click on our dashboard, so you go to Green Local Schools website, click on COVID-19. Once you're there into the dashboard, you can see everything from the date of a case, the number of COVID cases, you can see the quarantines that were associated with the case, and you can see a picture of the patterns that I'm talking about. And that's data that, like I said before, we're able to have conversations about with the healthcare professionals and take a look at it. So really, it's a great tool. But like I said, we are working to make that straightforward vision for our parents that just want to see on Monday of this week how many active cases are at my child's school, and that's what we're working on. So when you click on it, you'll continue to see an evolution of the information, but it will all be there.
And I don't mean to belabor, but so are you providing some definitions for things too? Like an active case is this, isolation is this, quarantine is that, so that there's no, oh, I thought an active case was someone who was actually walking around the halls and, currently
Yeah.
actively spreading the virus.
It's all there, and there's links from the medical professionals that have provided to us to share. I will say, as a parent, when you look at it, you can certainly understand how it's confusing and certain things it's difficult to get your mind around, but once you read into it and look at it, it becomes more clear. And then obviously, in the role that we're in right now, when I look at it every single day, the definitions make sense to me. It's just trying to understand it. So when you click on that link, all of those definitions are available, and you can make sense of it. But it does talk about the active cases, the quarantines, and then there's even links to talk about if your child's quarantined, what does that mean? What does that look like? Why is it the time period? And those are the questions that oftentimes we get. We're happy to answer. I know we've all been hit with a ton of information. There's so much print out there, and we're happy to just talk through it. But if you're somebody that just wants to learn more about it, the link has all that information and then some.
Awesome. All right, thanks. Anybody, other questions or comments about any of that, other dashboard stuff?
No, I think the dashboard's very well laid out, and sure, there's a ton of data that always is going to be available, but, seeing the starting period and seeing the ending period of, the cases and the incidents and things like that, I think is extremely helpful. So it's a good transparency piece. It's a good, just having that line of sight. So I think it's beneficial for the community.
For sure.
I will just make one comment. I think it's really important that when we hear of cases and we've heard, rumors or, maybe this person and all of those things are being said, and we need to be respectful and compassionate and realize with HIPAA that all of these things fall under the privacy. So that being said, when we do hear a case, it's a very confidential process where we're confirming with the health department to make sure that the person that may or may not have it is in the system. If it's not, the health department follows up and finds out why they're not, and this is happening very, very quickly, and we do not put any information out unless it is absolutely confirmed by the health department, and then they dictate the next steps for us. But we have had people reach in or call and say, I heard this person or this person was out at baseball or what have you, and I wanted everyone to know that the process is when we hear something, we confirm it, and then and only then do we move forward with the information. There's a lot of things out there that we just have to be careful that it's accurate. And obviously, when there are quarantines, as I said earlier, we understand the impact it has on families, households, kids, events, extracurriculars, learning. It's really important. We take it very, very seriously. But that is the first step. When we hear something, we get that confirmed and then go from there.
Outstanding. I did not receive any visitors or public participation stuff. We're being made aware that we do have a little bit of a live stream issue currently going on, and for that we apologize, but we'll make sure that we can do it the best we can. This will be up on the YouTube channel, I believe, right? Soon after, no?
I think it's only when we go 100% remote is the
Oh.
YouTube channel.
Okay.
I think it'll eventually it'll be on the website to view.
Oh, just like it normally is archived?
Yeah, the way it
Okay.
normally was before all of
Yeah.
this, yeah, but just not on the YouTube channel.
Okay, all right. And then board accommodations. We'll start with those at home. Mr. Cohen, if you'd like to start us out.
Surely, be happy to. First off, I want to thank some alumni volunteers who assisted with the community food drive to benefit Blessings in a Backpack. Over 4,000 items were collected. Special thanks to alumni Will Babbitt, Claire Blackledge, Annie Zwizzler, Isaiah Phillips, and somebody that I know, Denton Cohen, for returning to Green, well, returning in quotes because they're pretty much all here because of the pandemic, but offering to help, and that is fantastic. Great to get the alumni involved. Thank you to Shanna Cable and the entire transportation department for the last few weeks, and the Green Schools Foundation, who surprised the transportation team with special masks to recognize them for Bus Safety Week, which ran last week. Also, I would like to encourage all veterans to submit photos to the city to be included in the Joint City School Veterans virtual program on November 11th. And finally, I just wanted to say thanks once again to the administration, to the staff, teachers, students, parents for their continued patience through this crazy time that we're living in. I feel especially bad for the administration because I know, I'm sure I'm gonna, I hate to use an aviation reference, because Campbell is the aviator in this group, but I'm sure it's kind of like trying to refuel in midair in the middle of a hurricane. It's just not easy to do, and that target, the target's constantly moving around. And so I know that, Jeff, you and your fellow administrators are doing the very best that you can, and I appreciate you being a steady hand in this storm. And unfortunately, it looks like the storm is going to last several months longer. And so, I wish you the best because it's going to be a long winter. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sunshine, for that rosy outlook, and that was a horrible aviation reference, I might add. But on the heels of that, Mrs. Spinelli, why don't you give it a shot?
Well, Dr. Cohen stole my thunder. I wanted to thank the administrators also, and you guys have a hard job the way it is, and COVID, of course, has made it that much harder. But thank you for all that you do and all the hours that you put in and all the sweat and tears I know that you guys do have. I want to thank the teachers, the bus drivers, the secretaries, the lunch monitors that have to go door to door and provide lunches, which is very nice of them, and all the kids, I'm sure, appreciate it. I also wanted to say that we are watching the home football games on, I believe it's YouTube. I don't know, my husband finds it, so. But it's really nice to be able to watch it in your own living room and stay warm and see it close up. So if you want to know how to find that on your TV, you're going to have to call my husband. But it's awesome. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Spinelli. I'm sure your husband is looking forward to all the calls. Mrs. Stoyanov?
Good evening, everyone. Just echoing what Mr. Cohen and Mrs. Spinelli had to say. Thank you to everyone for your continued patience. It seems like we're saying this every month, but know that it's sincere every time we say it. From the administration to the teachers, to the staff, to everyone that is involved in making Green Schools work right now. Thank you so much. From one teacher to another, to our teaching staff, we see what you're doing. We see how hard you're working, and I know it's not easy, but you're really, really, really doing a great job. So we appreciate that so much. As we were approving the sheriff's contract tonight, it reminded me that Sheriff Steve Berry, will be moving on soon, and so I wanted to take a couple moments to thank him for his service from way back as a patrolman here in the city of Greene all the way through his 8 years as the Summit County Sheriff. He has been an exceptional partner for Greene schools, and I am privileged enough to call him a friend. And I wish him well in the next chapter that he's going on to into his retirement. We have been a better community for his service, and I sincerely appreciate it. Also want to thank again, we approved the nursing contract, and as was mentioned, what great partners they have been in a scenario that none of us could have predicted, but they have been invaluable to us as we continue to navigate the COVID situation. And so thank you to all of them. They really are frontline workers in all of this as far as manning our clinics and all of those necessary things for us to be able to continue to have students in the building. So thank you so much. And then I'll end on one happy note. I'd like to congratulate one more happy note. I guess I've tried to keep it a little bit more positive than Mr. Cohen this evening. I can't believe that I'm saying this, but congratulations to Xavier Kundale and to Emma Gary being crowned homecoming king and queen for our senior class this year. As you all know, because I've said it a million times, I'll say it a million more. I have a senior, and I can't believe that I'm talking about my son's senior class homecoming king and queen. I can still see both of these two wonderful young people as kids bopping around the halls, and now they're two outstanding young men and women. So congratulations to both of them. And with that, everybody have a good night. Oh, don't forget to vote. I almost forgot about that. Don't forget to vote November 3rd if you haven't already. Record-breaking numbers of early ballots have been cast, but if you haven't done that, take advantage of either early voting or voting in person on November 3rd. We do have a levy on the ballot, so please seek out some information about that. And everybody vote. It's your right. It's important. We should all take advantage of that. So on that note, have a good night.
Thank you, Mrs. Stoynoff. Mr. Chinaki.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I'd like to echo the same sentiments that several of my colleagues have shared with just, congratulating the students and the staff and the administrators on a first semester and a first grading period, already completed. No one in this country has started a school year in a pandemic. We ended in March in the middle of what we did not know at the time. There were a lot of moving pieces and parts that had to happen this summer and this week and this morning to get where we are right now. And it's, I've been on the board for 1 year, coming up here and elected in last November, and it's just, we talk about the collaborations and the joint efforts that we have with so many community partners and so many just different entities, and it's just, it really is something to sit back and marvel at. So Jeff and Edie and your teams, just thank you for all that you've done. It's incredibly fascinating to just think back and like, holy cow, here we are and we've done this. So on that note, thank you for the school year so far. I want to thank and hats off to Coach Geis and the football team for their postseason. First postseason game was a couple of weeks ago, first postseason game for Greene football in over 10 years. It was a heartbreaker, but it was really, really nice to watch on that stream. Have a live simulcast, broadcast, play-by-play, and didn't even have to call Sally's husband to figure out how to pull it up on my TV. But me and the kids enjoyed it and family enjoyed it. So I know that we'll be back, and I know that it's been a lot of fun rooting and cheering on the team. So, and final point was just the November 3rd. It's one of the things that makes the United States of America the United States of America, and I think that it's such a great thing to be able to get out and vote. So hopefully I encourage you all to get out there if you haven't already. Record numbers, as Ms. Stoynoff alluded to, millions and millions across the country, even several 100,000 already in the county and in the area have done it as well. And also, if you haven't yet, we would like to encourage your support for issue 39, which is the levy. So, it's what makes our district, it's what makes our community the school system, and it makes it such a vibrant place to live and thrive and be a part of. So, November 3rd, get out and vote. And stay safe, wear your mask, and just keep doing the things we need to do. Let's get through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki, and just as a reminder, issue 39, it's a renewal, no additional taxes. It's just renewing the money that's already, that we're using. Hopefully you feel that it's a wise use of your funds, and you trust us to continue to use it wisely. Just a couple things, the girls' golf team, number 4 overall in the state, and that was pretty awesome. With an individual, I think Emily Liptak, I think is who that was. She was number 6 individual finisher. I don't think they had the greatest of weather down. Well, they never do. It just seems like so. Eric, your comment about the football team was awesome. It was great. Sally, yours as well. It's like just watching them, and it's bringing it right there. And I believe the boys soccer team is still in the works. Is that correct? So. They won their first round playoff game, and I think they have a second one coming up here not too long. One of the things that always strikes me, and everybody has kind of mentioned it here, is the amount of, when I listen to Jeff, what you do every day to figure out on this dashboard and where people are at and what's going on with this and that. Edie, every day they come down with a new different directive as to no, use this fund rather than that fund. Oh, here's this money, but you don't get that money anymore. And it's just it's just amazing. I'm glad that I don't do either one of your jobs, because we'd be in a big mess right now. But I tell you, you guys, it's like, well, I'll use the aviation thing that Mr. Cohen was talking about. It might sound like it's going to be a bumpy ride, but if you're good enough, you make it pretty smooth. And you guys are, we are in the eye of this hurricane, and you guys are absolutely amazing. Your staff is amazing, and the way you guys keep it, just keep it rolling, and not with a bunch of smoke and mirrors either. It's like we've talked about before, if you take the time and you put in the effort, and your plan is solid, the way you guys do things, and your thought process is right on, then you can make adjustments to that and keep moving. And I think we all appreciate it, and hope that you guys feel that appreciation. I do think that there are times one of the things about bringing the kids back was that there was always a mental aspect to it. There was always a mental well-being and an emotional well-being for that. And I'm asking all of you, I'm begging all of you, anyone, that if you know someone, just make sure you're checking on people during this whole thing. It's just a terrible tragedy that we have to. These are cards we dealt, so we have to play that hand. We have no choice, but it doesn't mean that we have to play the hand alone. And if you haven't seen your neighbor in a while, you don't have to go over and go in their house or anything. Maybe call them or text them, or just, if you see them standing from your porch, just ask how they're doing, because you just never know. There's probably a lot of people out there are hurting, a lot of people out there that would just love just to talk to somebody. And if you're that person, then no greater thing can you do than to provide them for that. So, other than that, parents, students, community, keep doing what you're doing. Chief Boone and I put out a message about a week ago, really, emphasizing that, and we're going to do everything we can to keep the doors open safely, and know that, it takes all of us to do it, all of us here inside the district as well as those in the community. So, keep doing your part. We'll keep doing our part, and we'll get through this thing together. So, without anything for executive session, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Chinaki.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Finelli. Mrs. Snoberger.
Mr. Chinaki?
Yes.
Mrs. Finelli?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoynoff?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Get out and vote.